the cloud. Right.
My screen, yeah.
Yeah, and you should just be able to see everybody. Everyone will just see you. People's won't move around on this.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm just gonna set us onto Facebook Live now. George, if you just let people know that we're recording when you give the update, that'd be great. Thanks.
Right, welcome everyone. Hello, we're just waiting for everyone to be admitted, but thanks for coming today. This is the second day of our campaign, which is great. I'm actually going to put my earphones on so you can hopefully hear me a bit better. Okay, so it would help if I put my earphones on the right ears. Great, it's wonderful. Everyone's we've got people coming in, which is lovely. Okay, I'm going to start now because we've gone on to Facebook Live and we are recording. So just to remind people, we are recording. The spotlight is on Claire. So, but if you feel sort of self-conscious or anything about being recorded, you can always turn your cameras off. I'm just going to go through a little bit of housekeeping before we get going. So we're, as I say, we're on the second day of our campaign, which is great. And we are, so we're going to be running today from 1:30 till about 2:10. And then we're going to have a 10-minute break for a leg stretch and come back at 2:20 till 2:50. And so we'll have an opportunity for some questions at the end. I'd just like to ask everyone, we all know the general gist of these meetings now and these types of events, but can you all please keep yourself on mute? And if you have any questions, can you please put them in the chat box and we'll go through them at the end. This recording will be available on a YouTube channel, so you can watch it again. And also that's how you can direct your colleagues if they want to see the presentation. Okay, so I'm going to introduce Claire now. We're very fortunate to have Claire. She's was awarded her doctorate in 2015 for her thesis, Experience of Partner Selection and Relationships for People with Learning Disabilities. This explored how people with learning disabilities find romantic, love and form partnerships, what brings them together and what helps them in maintaining relationships. Following on from this, Claire has launched the Supported Loving Network, championing the right of people with learning disabilities to have love in their lives. She is a trainer and expert in the field of learning disabilities and relationships, and we welcome her here today to give her presentation and help us think about how we support the clients we work with to have healthy and happy relationships. So thank you, Claire. I am going to now turn my camera off, but I will of course be here and around if anything is needed. Does that sound all right?
Fantastic.
Thank you, Claire. Nice one. I will hand you over.
Okay. Thanks, Georgina. Thank you for that introduction. As you said, my name's Claire Bates and I run the Supported Loving Network. I have a really awful habit of putting my thumb over my microphone. So if you suddenly hear me go quiet, please let me know and we can try and sort it out and I'll move my thumb off the microphone. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about today and the work that I do in Supported Loving. The screen's frozen, but hopefully you can all still hear me. So I'm going to share my screen. So I'm going to share my screen here and talk you through some of the work that I do. So as I said, my name's Claire and I'm here today talking to you about the work that I do and about Supported Loving. I would ask you normally to put your hands up if you've heard of Supported Loving, but as I can't see your hands, it'd be really helpful if you could just write in the chat yes or no. So have you heard of what Supported Loving is? Can I just pop it in the chat? Has anyone of you heard of me?
So we've got one Yes, we've got some no's.
I'm pleased there's some no's there,
Yeah,
because otherwise.
Dina Holder is saying yes.
Okay, well, hopefully you haven't heard me speak before, because I will talk about some of the stuff I talked about before, because supported loving is really important to me, and it's really important to tell people what it is and where it's come from. So, who am I? I'm the person there with the green hair. I used to have green hair, purple hair now. This is obviously, as you can see by how close we all are sat together there. This is obviously this is obviously pre-COVID. This was taken, I was running a workshop with some people with learning disabilities in Peckham in London. Someone here had just said something really funny, and we were all laughing about it. Unfortunately, I haven't done one of these sessions in a really long time, so I've had to settle for doing it like this online, and it's been great in some ways because I've got to speak to more people than maybe I would have done before. But certainly missing lots of contact with lots of people with learning disabilities, because as we've seen in a lot of these events, it's often staff and supporters that join these events rather than the people that we're working with. So yeah, that's who I am. As I said, I started off work. I've worked in social care for a really long time. I work for a charity called Choice Support. They're the people who the organisation that hosts Supported Loving. And I started working back with them when I left school in 2002. So I've been there a long time, be 20 years in a couple of years. So yeah, so I've been there a long time, and I worked first of all as a support worker in our registered care services, and then I moved on to be a manager in our outreach team, and then I moved into our quality department in 2008. And I was really lucky because through support, they're a really good organisation, and they offered me the chance to do a PhD. Oh yeah, while I was doing all of that as well, I did a master's in psychotherapy, and I did quite a bit of work with people with learning disabilities as part of that. But I was looking to do a PhD, and Choice Support funded that. And I don't know, anyone's ever done a PhD before? It's quite a long process. Takes a long time, and I remember being incredibly bored doing my master's one, so I decided this time to pick something really really important to me, and we were looking at, sometimes you see him actually, my husband Jeremy, he often walks backwards and forwards on our boat, but so I got married not long after being offered the chance to do a PhD, and I started looking at I've met hundreds, thousands of people, probably thousands of people who learn disabilities now, but at the time it was probably hundreds. So I used to travel around doing audits for our quality team, and I was just wondering, like, why were there so few people with a learning disability who had romantic relationships? Like, so we knew a lot of people that had boyfriends and girlfriends, but there are often, like, I'll talk about this more when I talk about another piece of research that we done, but at the time it was, the relationship seemed like very stuck. Like, there was, someone would have a boyfriend or a girlfriend at a day service that they maybe saw, they never saw outside of that setting, or they might have a boyfriend or girlfriend that they saw at a social club. They might send Valentine's Day cards to each other, but the relationship never really progressed. Very few people had what looked, obviously relationships are different for everybody, but there was very few people that had relationships that looked like mine, that were like, sort of very committed relationships where people were living in the same home, not necessarily sexual, but sexual relationships certainly. I didn't come across many relationships like that. Maybe some older couples that had been married. I think the Mental Capacity Act had a lot to do with that. I think there's been less marriages since the Mental Capacity Act, but there's also been like a lack of government focus on this. So back in the glory days of valuing people, when that government paper was published, there was a real focus in that around, and certainly around the early, when I first started at Choice Support in 2002, a lot of focus on like leading ordinary lives and really supporting people to have really positive relationships, and to strive for the same things that we all want. So loving relationships, friendship, employment, and then around the time I was starting my PhD, which was probably around 2010, that was when the financial crash happened. time for the next one. So there was the financial crash happened, and there was a lot of austerity happened, and there was a real lack of, I think there'd been a real lack of around this, and moving forward, I'll talk about that when I talk about a project we've done very recently. And there was just a lack of focus on relationships. There was just a real lack of focus on it was all, austerity, things were cut to the bone. And there wasn't really a lot of talking in services, in people's support about intimate relationships. It seemed like it had been something we'd forgotten about. And there were so few couples. I met so few couples that I decided my PhD was going to focus on that. That I was going to focus on relationships with people. What did people want in a partner, and how did that translate in reality? So what kind of relationships did people want, and what were they getting? So that's what I started out with. So I just see stuff coming in the chat. I hope you can still hear me. Oh, as long as you can still hear me. Okay, so that's what we.
Yeah,
that's what
you're all good, Claire. We can hear you. You're brilliant.
I had terrible trouble the other day when people couldn't hear. Okay, so that's what we've done. So gonna look at relationships. Excellent. So started off with that as the idea. And what did we find? Well, found it was really hard to get into charities to talk to people with learning disabilities about their relationship. That was it's become easier now to do that. I think people trust supported loving a little bit more, and are more likely to let me. We've had a bit more luck with research and to speak to people, but initially it was very, very difficult. So that was my initial finding. Charities don't want you coming in there talking to people about really sensitive things. But we did the research, and we found, sorry if anyone has heard me before, but it is one of those things that is, it's the basis, it's what supported loving was built on, basically. It found that relationships were really important to people. So I met couples from all over the country, and they all had different views on what a relationship looked like. So some couples couldn't live together because they were worried about their benefits being taken away. So these were people on very low support, but getting, their benefits were going to be affected. There was couples who lived together but didn't share a bed. They had physical disabilities that would have made that really difficult. There were people who were very young and had good sex lives and were looking to get married. There was couples who were already married. So there was all different views. Didn't speak to any people who were LGBTQ plus. So that was it was 2010. I think we've got much more open about that now as well. But at the time, that was quite a challenge for me. So they're all men, male, female, cisgender. It was all quite dated now, not very woke. But yeah, so that was who we spoke to. But having a relationship to all these people was incredibly important. It was incredibly important to them, and they love their partners as much as I love mine. It might just look different. The other thing we found was that relationships reduced isolation. So a lot of the people really valued having someone to share their lives with, and it wasn't just someone. Most of them lived in bar a couple lived in 24-hour support. They had loads of staff. They lived with housemates. That was an issue in of itself. I'll talk about it in a minute. So that was an issue. But their partner was something different. It was someone who was theirs. It was someone who was very uniquely theirs. It was someone who was really important. It made people feel less lonely. They were able to engage in things and join in with things that they wouldn't have been able to before. Valentine's Day was really important. Going on dates, being seen in public with somebody. I think it was a real, I don't want to say status symbol because that makes me think of a BMW, but it was a real sort of outward sign in the public domain that they were wanted. They were like everybody else, and they had someone who loved them. Support, that was really important. We are talking about sexual safety as part of the campaign here. Most of the women that I spoke to, I think it was probably about six women, they were very in-depth interviews over several sessions. So most of the women had experienced some form of sexual abuse. And partners were very, very important in that. They provided emotional support. In some cases, one person provided emotional support, actually confronting, reporting the abuse. They were a great source of comfort to their partner, and others were emotional support. They helped couples. There's at least 2 couples who were 3 actually, I think, who were able to move past their abusive relationships and actually enjoy a loving sexual relationship with a partner post abuse, which was absolutely sort of fundamental to people, I think, to be able to have a loving partner, to trust, and to be able to move past that. So they also provided practical support as well, like helping people to, maybe if they couldn't do buses, someone would help them on the bus, or if someone wasn't very good at cooking, they would help with that. So they provided emotional support. There was a lot of barriers to people's relationships. So this was done in 2002. Remember this when we get on to the next one. So we're talking almost a decade later. We'll see some of the same things coming up, which is why it's Supported Loving. We do kind of feel passionately that the time for research in this area is probably over, and we need to start taking some action. Group living, privacy was a massive issue. So people really struggled to get privacy. Couples, they were having sex and their housemate was trying to get in their bedroom. That was one issue. Couples not liking it, jealousy when one person has a relationship and the other person doesn't. It caused conflict. Couples really not enjoying living in a group environment. It was very difficult, and it was hard for people to move out as well. That was a bit of an issue. People found it really difficult to get out of their house because it was, lengthy delays, not suitable properties, red tape that we would never imagine experiencing when we were trying to move in with our partner. Staff restrictions. Now, some of the ones, when you try and do research, the thing is, you're always trying to reach that dark matter, as I call it. All the organisers, when you do stuff like this, the same organisations come up again and again and again. I want to know, where are the really crap ones? Where are the really awful organisations? I know they're out there because I've done some auditing in some services, but they're not the ones that come forward for research. They're not the ones that agree. They're not the ones that let you in. So the staff restrictions that I saw were less, I think, restrictive than some of the worst that are out there. Because these were pretty decent organisations. Obviously, I can't name them, but I know them well, and that they're good organisations. But there were still restrictions, infantilising more of people, not letting couples sharing a bed on weeknights when they've got to go to college or to work the next day. These were adults in their 30s. I mean, it was crazy. Not allowing couples to cuddle downstairs because it upsets other people in the house. It's their house. They weren't having sex on the sofa. They were just cuddling. But, people sort of had minor, I suppose what we call nowadays like microaggressions, but overall they really contributed to like an infantilizing of the people with learning disabilities. No one was absolute, from memory, this was nearly 10 years ago, nobody was stopped having a relationship, but the way they were treated showed the staff didn't really value that relationship in the same way as we would people without a disability. Now this is where the staff, I did see a lot of really good support. Staff gave a lot of advice and practical and emotional support. So particularly when there was people who had experienced abuse in the past, the men that I spoke to, several of those had experienced what I would call like sort of financial abuse or psychological abuse from partners, so stealing or calling them names. So staff were really on hand. They gave a lot of support to people about keeping themselves safe, so that was really important. And I don't think without good support, the relationships people had wouldn't have been so positive. They gave people a lot of support on how to keep themselves safe, how to respect their boundaries, how to say no about things they're not unhappy with, checking with the person that they're happy with the situation. And also just helping people know how to date. What, someone's smiling at me, someone's flirting with me, what do I do? A lot of people learn disabilities. We learned that on the playground. We learned that growing up, going to school discos and underage drinking in pubs, probably, or I did. And people, people hung out and they got advice from their friends, their mates, Cosmo magazine, all that kind of stuff. People who learn disabilities, they don't have, we're not in the completely modern age yet. People probably, I mean, things are changing now because they can get on smartphones and have a look online. But certainly, the people I was talking to back in 2010, their staff were their main source of support, and which shows how important staff are in terms of the power that they have to make or break relationships, which is where we go next. because what next? So anyway, I know it's the same line. Someone told me who talked before. I always say this, you know, you do a PhD, and often what happens is it just sits there. And I believe really passionately that the research, you know, should be used. We should be doing something with this. Otherwise, loads of other academics read it, and I'm not being mean to other academics, but I know academics that publish stuff, and then that's it. It's over. And I'm just, you know, it's not over. It hasn't. You know, someone needs to take that on. Someone needs to take that research on and do something with it. So what was going to come next? So supported loving come next. I'm just going to play you a really quick film about supported loving, just because it's got some really powerful quotes in it.
I don't think it's easy for people with learning difficulties today.
I'm Dr. Claire Bates. I work at Choice Support, and we founded the Supported Loving campaign. And the aim of the campaign is to highlight the importance of good support for people with learning disabilities to have loving relationships.
Love is when you find a person to love you.
I think everybody deserves love. I don't think everybody should be on their own.
I was lonely. I didn't have no friends to talk to, nobody, all by myself. Cook myself, shopping myself.
One of the main findings of the research was that people with learning disabilities often needed a lot of support around relationships.
Well, the first time I met him, he was shy. But it was his eyes.
I like the eyes.
Yeah, well, I've been together 10 years.
When we got the wedding together, the day, everything, quite a few family members actually came to me and thanked us because they never believed that it would happen. When you truly do love somebody, regardless of all those barriers, of a lot of people fighting against you, that, you know, you can go forward.
I know I can open my heart to Dave, and I know he'll listen.
I don't want anybody else, only him I wanted.
Without David, my life would be in pieces. And he's the best partner any girl could want.
My eyes hit her eyes straight away and true love.
So that was the very first promo video of Supported Loving when we first started with no budget. So we started 2 years ago. So Supported Loving initially started just as to raise awareness. That's all we wanted to do. It was a 6-month campaign. If anyone knows what an appraisal goal is, it was an appraisal goal of mine. It's now my whole life. And we've grown from there. So we started off with a social media campaign with a couple of 100 followers. We've now got nearly 1,000 members across the UK, including Scotland, Wales. We've got a Welsh network. We've got members in Northern Ireland. We've talked about supported loving in Europe. I've been in conferences in Australia online. It's really been a huge thing for us. It's been massive, and I'll show you our website at the end. So we've really been building and building, but we started off just wanting to raise awareness. And our national network meetings, as you can see there, they're a real good mix of when we can actually meet in person, of people with learning disabilities, some people with autistic people. I'll be honest, that is a smaller group of what we do. We mainly, because obviously my background's learning disabilities, that's predominantly where we focus, but we are looking to become much more inclusive and much more looking around the issues that some autistic people face, because they are very similar in some instances and totally different in others. So that's an area for us to develop into. But we share best practice. We've got a toolkit, we've got lots of other stuff, but I'll come back to that at the end so I can show you what we've got. But our main thing was we just wanted to raise awareness before, and then I just thought, well, that's not really enough, is it? Really, we've been around for 3 years, and we really actually want to we want to do some, we want to make some big changes. And Supported Loving, we are not a dictatorship, so we had a discussion about what we thought were our areas that we should be focusing on, and people really felt that we needed to get CQC to take us seriously. We needed to get them to put this in their key lines of inquiry, because currently it's just got one line in it around you get sort of help with sex and relationships do you get help around, do you get support around your sexuality and relationships? Because we thought that to actually get to this dark matter, all those, so there's organisations that never engage, that we never hear about, that maybe are doing good work, maybe they're not, maybe what about all the organisations? There are loads out there we know that aren't great. How do we make everyone have to pay attention to this? And we thought, well, we'll make CQC tell them, because that seems to be a good way to get them to do that. So we've been involved in there. We helped write their guidance. So there's actually CQC guidance, which is on our website, that we helped write. And we were consultants on a big report called Sexual Safety for Empowerment. So they looked at abuse cases, CQC, well, allegations, so notifications of abuse, and they were really keen to sort of like, obviously, to make sexual abuse not happen in their services, but we were involved, and I was like a dog with a bone, just every time it was my turn to talk, I was saying, well, there's no, to make people safe, to make people safer, we need to give people support and education. Because yes, there are going to be cases where, if someone is going to do something that will happen, that we can't, sexual abuse, someone's determined to abuse somebody, then they're probably, that unfortunately that probably would happen. But for a lot of people, it's about, how do we help people to keep themselves safe? How do we help staff to spot the signs that something could be heading in that way? How do we give people support around education around sex and relationships when maybe they've never had it? We thought like empowering people is the way to keep people safe. So we think it should be mandatory training for staff as well. And I'm really pleased. Today's a really exciting day for me. I've been really busy this morning. If you want to have a look on our social media, we've just published something today. So we've published freely available to everybody guidance on supporting sex and relationships. Got loads and loads of free stuff in there, like it's effectively a little training pack that you can use for free, along with guidance around the law. It's written for any group, any user group. It's got older adults and people with disabilities. It covers a lot of information. So that was done in partnership with CQC and Skills for Care. And we're currently just about to start a project with Skills for Care, reviewing all the existing training materials for staff that exist around sex and relationships. So we've done well in the last 3 years of getting Skills for Care and CQC to actually listen to us and to take what we're saying on board. I'm not saying they wouldn't have done it without us, they might have done, but we've certainly been badgering them quite a lot around this, because we think it's so important. We need to keep people safe, and we think the way to do that is through education. We also think making people that use services and use social care, they need to be aware of their rights. And that's why there we go. There's the report. These are the things that we've done. But we felt it was really, really important. Oh, here we go. I'll tell you what, I'll show you now. So this is our rights charter. So this is something we've developed. This was part of a project. We feel like it's really, really important for people to know their rights. So that's one of our main things. If you take anything away from today, one is to read the Skills for Care guidance. The other one is to share this as far and wide as you can. So it talks about your rights. So it's got loads of stuff there. What are my rights and what are my responsibilities around sex and relationships? Because we don't believe, we believe to keep people safe, they need to know what their rights are. That's something we don't think people get enough information on, is their rights. Hopefully you can see that. It didn't just stay on my, it might have just, hopefully it didn't just stay on my screen for this. If not, we'll share it, it's fine. Can I carry on, or are we stopping now?
We've got 5 more minutes, or if we've reached a natural break, that's also fine.
We can finish the film because it's 5 minutes and then we'll have a break.
Sounds good.
Okay, so I'm just going to show you a film. I can't see what it says above that because my screen's blocking it out. But this is a film. So my PhD was in 2010. I've been really lucky ever since then. So I do work at Choice. I work at Choice Support, but I also am an honorary research associate, and I was seconded to the Tizard Centre, which is a centre for excellence for learning disability and autism research. I've been there 6 years this year, starting my 7th probably, no, 6 at the moment. And we did a project. And it was called the Love Project. And I'm going to talk more about it when we come back. But I'm just going to show you the film here that we made. So this was looking at relationships and relationship support. Remember, my PhD was 2010. This is 2019. So how much has changed in 9 years? Let's have a look.
Love is a wonderful feeling.
It's sharing each other's lives.
I love her. Like, she's my universe. She's everything.
Love makes me feel really nice.
I was really shy and it's hard to find relationships.
But basically, lonely. I didn't have kind of much friends.
I've been wanting to get a relationship, but I've not found the right person yet.
For me, I can be very shy, so initial introductions can be really difficult.
Love makes me feel happy, excited, feel loved up.
To share your life with someone else.
Basically finding your soulmate.
It shouldn't come as a surprise to anyone that adults with learning disabilities value loving relationships as much as anyone else. But in the past, it was usually very difficult for people with learning disabilities to have the relationships they wanted. A group of researchers decided to look at what support people with learning disabilities are getting today.
I've been working in the field of sexuality and relationships for people with learning disabilities for a very long time, and the reason that I wanted to do research now was just to see what the state of play is in terms of people's relationships. So many years ago when I first started, I would have to say that support was not very good for people with learning disabilities if they wanted to find a partner and stay with a partner.
I just fell in love.
Also, we get each other, so many levels, and also like we have a laugh at each other, and we can talk on many things as well.
15 months in April.
Yeah.
That's how long we've been together. We've known each other a little longer than that.
We met through Love Life, and Ailey got us together. We had a few dates, and chaperoned me and Ryan on a date in Southampton, and we went to Wetherspoons for a meal, and then Ailey said to us we're okay to do it on our own, and we've been now together nearly 6 months. But we're enjoying every moment of it, and it's been the best time ever.
Yeah, it has. Yeah, we're going to go to Harry Potter Studio this Monday.
Yeah.
And the Lion King Theatre. And we're going to take a small trip to Paris.
We go out together doing things like shopping and that sort of thing with each other and helping each other out.
Not only that, we played snooker as well.
We're like, we just like each other's company. We're like...
Yeah, we love talking to each other, communication.
Yes. Just having fun together, really.
Yeah, and going out places too.
That's right.
Yeah, fun times.
We meet new people in the group, we meet new friends, we get to talk to them, we do a lot of events as well, which is amazing.
We go on holiday and enjoy it together, and we do go out when we're on holiday and do what we want to do. And
one of the things that we asked people about is what love meant to them and what it meant to their lives to have a loving relationship. If you think about it, well, most of us want that and most of us like that, and just because you have a learning disability, that's not going to be any different. So it was very important to people to have a loving relationship, and it meant that they could do things together with their partner which perhaps they could never have done themselves. So it enhanced their lives in a whole number of ways.
Lovely of a heart. Boop, 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 boop.
I think somebody with a learning difficulty should have support, like trying to find a boyfriend.
Yeah, living together, get married, children. But it all takes time.
It does, and it's, you know, lots of things to discuss as well.
We like get married. Also, we want to to have kids as well, and we want to go live together as well.
Obviously, there are extra challenges, but we think we can do it. We want to be like everyone else. We would just want to be equals.
Met my true love, and I'm very happy how things are going now. So I am really enjoying it.
Okay, that's probably a natural ending point there. When do we come back?
Hi, so we're just gonna have we were gonna have a 10-minute break. Does that sound too much for you, Claire, or does that sound enough?
Yeah, that's fine.
So if everyone could be back at 20 past, and then we'll have we'll keep going till about 10 to 3, and then we'll have some question times.
Sorry, Georgina, sorry to ask, but isn't 20 past 15 minutes? Is my watch wrong?
Oh no, I'm horrendous at my timings. So it's 10 past, it's roughly 10 past now, say. So let's meet back at 20 past, and then we'll keep going till 2:45, and then we'll have some question time.
Okay.
Is that good? Apologies. Take care, everyone. Have a nice little break.
Thank you. Good.
Okay, we're back. We're back, everyone. Okay, hopefully
you're muted.
Oh, I'm muted.
Oh no.
No,
you're not.
I'm not muted.
You're
okay.
not muted. You're not muted. I haven't got my earphones on. That is just a Zoom comedy classic, isn't it?
I know. That's it to my husband the other day. How many times do you say you're on mute in a day now?
It's new language, isn't it, for us? Okay, I'm going to hand you back over, Claire, and we've got some really interesting questions coming in. So yeah, we'll get onto those towards the end.
Cool.
Great.
I'll just share my screen again. I'll just speak really briefly. So this was the project I was talking about, the Love Project. So I hope you've come back and you'll come back. So yeah, so we did the Love Project. As you see, those members there were part of it. And we spoke to 40 people with learning disabilities, 20 parents of people without learning disabilities, parents of learning disabilities, and 30 adults with learning disabilities, I should say, and 30 support staff. I'm not going to go through all this in much detail because it's really similar. As you can see, loving relationships really important. The thing that was different to my research was now there are quite a few dating agencies that support people with learning disabilities. They're very select in terms of there aren't many across the country. There are probably about 10, and they don't cover massive geographical areas because their funding is very limited, but they were a great value to people because they often provided education as well. And people face barriers. The transport was an issue, time, cost, so not having staff to drive them, or the cost if people had to get taxis everywhere. There's a lot of fear around people using public transport on their own, especially at night. So transport was sort of geared around getting cabs, which was very expensive. Living in residential care could be restrictive because activities were often geared towards making friends. How many learning disability events have you been to where there's no bar? As adults, we would all, have met many people with learning disability who like a beer. Often there's a snack box or something like that. So not really, the kind of places that we would go if we were going to be meeting a partner. And a lack of internet access, that was something in 2010 maybe that wasn't such an issue. But yeah, lack of internet, that was a big thing. And we've seen this in the pandemic, just how few people, obviously a lot of people learn to are online, but compared to the numbers of people, it is lower than the general population. As I found here, family and staff are supported, very essential, consistently throughout research of how staff and families can be supportive. However, some were unsupportive. Staff putting dampeners on things, a lack of continuity. So you might have one staff member that were really positive about relationships. They go, they're replaced by someone else. It's not their focus. You know, things sort of fall off the So it can be very much potluck of who you're supported by. But as you can see, really similar. So Michelle did this research to look at things from her study that was done in the 90s, so 10 years before mine, then mine, now this one again 10 years later. So we're seeing the same issues coming up over and over again, which is why I wrote a blog for Learn Disability Today a while back saying the time for research in this area is over. Like, I shouldn't say that because it's going to put me out of a job for funding bids, but I feel like we know enough when it comes to this now. We know what the barriers are. We just need to bloody do something about it. And stop the barriers, because you know we don't need another report telling us what the barriers are. Staff, as I said, this was really important because this was actual academic research from a good institution and peer-reviewed journals. It was really great for us to be able to take this to CQC and Skills for Care, and really kind of pushing. This is what we're using to push people right now. It's sort of saying, we've got academic studies, we've got anecdotal stuff coming out of our ears, and people need training, and staff need to be supported by organisations to know that if they start supporting couples or people around their sexuality, that they're not going to get in trouble. People worry that they're going to get in trouble, and actually by not giving people support and education in this area, they're going to do it anyway, and they're going to do it without your support or guidance or without any education or input, and they might end up being more vulnerable than they would have been if you'd helped them. Staff are really worried about people being abused and getting hurt in relationships, which is much harder if we're talking about people with lower support needs. So people who have, you know, capacities around their sexual decisions, and we're there in a not really helping with that situation, not really there to help with that kind of support. So staff are really worried about people being vulnerable, and it is a real concern. I mean, CQC's report shows that report is slight. Haven't been involved in that. Like, it is a good report, but it's also heavily, I mean, ridiculously heavy, disproportionately skewed to adult services. So that it was taken from notifications. Most of those are from older adult services. Now, the thing about older adult services is these are often people, from what we'd heard, but people who'd had full sexual lives before they'd gone into care. They now have dementia or some other illness that can often affect like their inhibitions and their. I'll be honest, I'm not a great expert in dementia. I'm not a doctor in that area, but they, you know, people forget like their, you know, that their inhibitions are lower due to their dementia, and that leads to issues. Whereas a lot of people with learning disabilities in that report, it was that they, you know, they were a much smaller proportion, because they haven't had the same opportunities as the rest of us to develop these lives. But it also means that it also shows how people were left out of education around sex and relationships. There was a lack of places for people to go. Our study found a lack of places to meet people, lack of funding. So as I talked about earlier, austerity really impacted on clubs. Lots of clubs shut down. Staffing hours cut, only one staff on at night. How can you go out if there's only one staff unless everyone goes, and maybe staff can't take everyone out? So yeah, there was a real issue around that. And parents. So parents, a barrier. Some people saw parents as a barrier, and saying, how do we work with parents around this? Which is a real problem. We hear it a lot. Spoke to parents. Again, getting into organisations to talk to people with learning disabilities is difficult. Talking to parents is even harder because you really struggle, because you don't really get the parents that have an issue about this aren't going to talk to you. So it was really, really hard to find parents. I did find some parents, and they were the positive parents. So these are the parents that wanted their sons or daughters to get have a relationship. But some of these people, they had their limits. So they were all happy for people to have relationships. They weren't that keen on them having sex. They definitely didn't want them to have children. But for some people, they did want them. Absolutely. Some people definitely did want their adult children to have families. They gave a lot of support, like the support workers did. They were taking people on dates. One woman spent a night in A&E when her son's date had a seizure. You know, there was a lot of extra support going on. And and also providing education to their adult children or siblings. One woman explained how she had to explain masturbation to her brother, which was an uncomfortable conversation for both of them. But it was, because they weren't able to get that support anywhere else, so they were providing it. They were worried about people getting hurt. Same thing again. Parents of daughters, so they were much more overprotective than sons. There was a bit of attitude of get in there, my son, and keep the women safe. That definitely came out in the research. But these parents thought that staff didn't take enough risks. So they were risk averse. They didn't want people to join dating agencies and stuff like that. But as I said, these parents were probably on the very positive end of the parents scenario compared to maybe parents in the main. Certainly the parents we hear people talking about supported loving, where they really struggle to where that someone may begin a relationship and parents are against it. And it's even harder if somebody lives at home, because parents obviously have a lot more influence there. So that was the parents. I'll come back to that if we've got time. But sorry, hang on. Sorry, something's gone a bit weird in my PowerPoint there. So I'll come back to the video if we've got time there. I don't think we will. So I'm just going to talk a little bit, because obviously this is about sexual issues people face, and I'm just going to talk a little bit about that. I'll be honest, I've never done a study where I've looked very specifically at sex. A lot of supported loving, a lot of stuff we've done. My research today, I'm quite a new researcher. I've only been sort of postdoc since in the last 4 or 5 years. So I've done some other research looking at bisexual relationships, people learn to and the Love Project. But there is a lot of research out there around sexual inequalities faced by people with learning disabilities. And this is something supported loving is really keen to focus on, to making there less sexual inequalities faced by people with a learning disability. So there's a whole body of research. I mean, there's mountains of this that shows people with learning disabilities have lower levels of sexual knowledge and are more likely to hold negative views around sex. I don't know if it is this study, and I can't remember the statistic, which would be really helpful if I could tell you guys. But it's really sad. It's high percentage. It's something like 80% of women, I can't remember the exact number of women with a learning disability think that sex is wrong no matter the partner. So there's a lot of internalized views from women, particularly with learning disabilities, that sex is something dirty and something wrong. And something that people shouldn't do. So that's a real barrier around relationships with people with a learning disability, and lower levels of sexual knowledge. And this is also true for autistic people as well. I'm in the process of putting in a bid for some more funding to look at, because often autistic people's views really aren't very well represented in the UK in research. And they often get lumped in with learning disabilities, which isn't really right. And then their level of sexual knowledge is also lower. But the whole feeling that sex is wrong no matter whoever the partner is, that clearly shows that people have internalized that from somewhere. And research sort of says that can be viewed from family members or from parents or from teachers, that they're given these messages that sex is dirty and sex is wrong and sex is not for them. And the levels of sexual knowledge. So I'm not a sex ed trainer, but I do run workshops for people with learning disabilities, and I've done some around sex, but I've done some really basic ones. I ran a women's group for 6 weeks last summer, and we looked at really basic knowledge about periods, about where babies, how babies are made, like what I would consider like something very, very simple. And I was shocked at how little people knew about their bodies, their own bodies. And yeah, it really put the research into practice for me, just how much how far we've got to go, really. And also how hard it is to teach sex ed. So big up all the sex ed teachers out there. Like it can be a challenging thing to teach, to help everyone, because lots of different levels for people to understand. But yeah, sexual knowledge is a real issue. People really do need to, and because sex education has only been made mandatory in schools in special, well, in all schools, and including special schools. So ones where in 2020, and people can be removed from some aspects of it, but not around the bit around relationships and consent and things like that. So yeah, so people are going to, but that only affects young people with a learning disability. So you've got, you know, anyone with the post-school age, and I think most people I spoke to, anyone sort of over the age of 30 probably is maybe 25. It doesn't, you know, they've probably not had this information at school. Some have, but it's inconsistent. Incidents of sexual abuse may go unreported due to a lack of education. You don't know that if you don't know what something is, you may not know that it's wrong. So by not teaching people about good and bad touch, appropriate, non-appropriate, you know, what to do if something's happening, how about consent and things like that, then they're not gonna, you know, it's probably going to go unreported. So there's a real argument there. Mia and Combrinick, can't pronounce that. So that they make a real argument there about how, you know, it's really important if people have education, you know, they can know when something's wrong and know when something's happening that it shouldn't do. So another way about keeping people safer. Something by Public Health England found that women with mild and moderate learning disabilities are more likely to have unprotected sex and to become pregnant. The report was quite didn't really go into detail about why that may be, but it could certainly be, if we look at sexual knowledge, probably because a lot of people don't have a knowledge around sexual, you know, around contraception. We did a bit of the workshop where we brought in some examples of different types of methods of contraception, and when I showed somebody a condom and I asked them what was it for, they said, is it something to do with periods? And this was somebody who had a boyfriend. So I was really surprised. This was somebody I would guess probably in her mid-30s. She'd clearly never had any information around sex and relationships. So you can see why people are possibly more likely to get pregnant. And one of the things that we certainly hear a lot about at Supported Loving and through our research is that sexual health services, not all, but some, can be poorly prepared to support people with reasonable adjustments. I actually know in my research, we've had people come and say they tried to access their sexual health services and were basically told they didn't really, they don't really work with people like that here. They couldn't, they felt they should go back to their GP because they really weren't, they didn't have anyone there that worked with people with learning disabilities. Or people, you know, just didn't really understand that, you know, they didn't have any accessible information, you know, not really understanding the needs of the people they were working with. That being said, we know there are some really excellent services. There's a place called the Bridge in London that does specialist services, and we've heard of, I can't remember, Lancashire in the service in Lancashire that is making all accessible information. They get input from people with learning disabilities regularly on what they're doing, which is really good. But it's very, very patchy, and there doesn't seem to be anything universal around that. Deficits in knowledge, yes. So things that have happened that have been allowed to happen. We often talk about, things like masturbating in public, and that could be in a public place. Someone gave an example of how someone was always allowed to masturbate in the toilet in the day service. You know, people don't realise that that's actually illegal, and that it shouldn't be. It legally, on a legal standard, anyway, it's a public bathroom. It is still a public bathroom where people can come into. That person then went and masturbated in the toilet in the shopping centre in Birmingham in the Bullring, and the police were called. Because that person, you know, had always done that in the day service, they had never had any education around why that was wrong, which led to problems with the police. So, you know, by not helping people to understand some of the issues, things like invading people's space and consent, if we're not teaching people these problems, these issues now, helping them to understand about them when they're younger, it can lead to much more serious issues in the future, and possibly things like police involvement. So it's really important. I mean, I think my next slide is just saying that Supported Loving, we are really, really, really passionate about education. And Spango Wilson, this was someone who did a piece of study. He said education is the key to empower people as individuals to identify, report and prevent sexual assault and abuse. and I was really pleased today. So CQC, I haven't put it in the presentation, but it literally came out a few hours ago. CQC done a podcast where Jim Thomas from Skills for Care talks about the guidance that we wrote in conjunction with the Sexual Safety and Through Empowerment report, and what he says in that, which is obviously clearly what we believe as well, is that we need to be educating our staff force. We need to be educating, the Human Rights Act, Article 12 says that Article 10, people have a right to education. So people have a right to education and information. So if somebody needs information and education about sex, then we should be giving it to them as part of the Human Rights Act. But it's also about keeping people safe. If you have the information, it's much easier to keep yourself safe. And Skills for Care also believe that about our staff as well, that we need to be training our staff so that they can be more confident when responding to issues such as this, because we have such a British attitude sometimes for things. I love it when I go and do training with staff, and we've got a whole load of code words for things sometimes. Like, the staff will be like, when he comes home, he goes up to his bedroom, and he's doing, he's doing that, he's doing that thing, he's doing, what would he sing? And I'm like, what is he doing? Is he masturbating? And they'll be like, they'll be like, yeah. And it'll be like, we're talking about a load of grown people that can't even say the word masturbation. I think we need to be much better at having these kind of conversations. I do it all the time, and I got more used to it. But people do really get embarrassed about things, including people we support. And we have to remember that this is something so sensitive to all of us, and it obviously is to the people that we're talking to, and it's very important that these conversations are only had when sufficient trust has been built. We're talking about talking to people about their intimate lives. It should be once we've built a really good relationship with that person, if possible, which is why we should always be doing things proactively, not reactively. So education is often provided to people and training teams. This is what we see all the time, is something will happen and then they'll ask people to come in and give support and advice. And what happens then is that sort of sex and relationships are only seen as a problem, rather than everyone much more in advance thinking about this and having conversations with people before we get there, before it's an issue. And seeing relationships and sexuality is something, support around this is just natural, just part of our everyday support. If we can talk about people's bowel habits, and we can talk about their mental health and their money and all that, which are sensitive things to us, relationships are part of that. And it's much better that we come in and we be much more proactive than reactive when it comes to things like that, because it's always, otherwise sex is seen as a problem, and we only ever get any support or education when there's an issue. So what can we do to help people know about their rights and access relationships and sex education? As I said, the charter. So I was really keen for the Love project that we've done to have something really. Often you get we made the videos. So the videos that I showed you, they form part of a much larger film. It's 25 minutes long, and it has in it some fantastic role plays acted by people with learning disabilities and some acting some amateur dramatic students at the University of Kent, and they were those common issues that came up in our research. So we made the film, and there's actually the scenarios there, and it's really a good tool to go through with staff teams and with people with learning disabilities, just about thinking about some of the issues. There's ones there about people wanting a partner to stay overnight. Someone wants to go out and meet their boyfriend and they're worried about them getting the bus home. Parents stopping someone having a relationship. The real common ones that come up time and time again in our research. So they're really good to go through with the staff and the teams. There's also the rights charter, which I've got here. I can send out. I'll send it to Georgina, and she can send that. So we made this, My Life, My Choice, and the NDTI. They did a really similar project to us. But just focusing mainly on Oxfordshire, and they spoke to commissioners as well. So we actually joined together, and we made a charter based on some of the really common issues that came up within our research. So feel free to look at that. As I said, most important, it'd be great if you could share it. The other thing we've got is our website. Now, hopefully, I can leave this page, and you can also take you to our website and show you around. Hopefully, you can also see that. Someone just tell me if you can. It's not just stuck on the presentation, no?
Yeah, we're all good. We can, it's on the presentation.
It's on the presentation.
We can see the slide presentation.
Oh, right. Okay. Hang on. Let me just do it again. Let me go to this. Okay. I'm just going to, you can see the Supported Loving page now, yeah?
Yeah, that's all good.
Excellent. Right. Okay. So I'll just show you, if I've got 4 minutes left, really briefly. Here's our website. All our events, all our network events are on there, but the place to really get those is on our mailing list. Here's our toolkit. We have a free toolkit on here that we add to, constantly. Pages and pages and pages. I mean, I'll just pick, you know, domestic violence. That's obviously quite topical for what we're talking about today. So everyone's written by an expert with some in that field. If you go down to here, it's got the toolkit, do's and don'ts, videos, resources, and there's visits, there's loads, and there's something for, there's one for nearly everything I could think of, if I'm honest. If there's one you're missing, let us know. Even how to access a sex worker, we've got it all. So that's really useful. A blog, I haven't done a blog in a while. So our podcast and webinar series, so I run webinars constantly, and we've always got a long load of them here. They're on everything. We've got a whole back catalogue. We've got ones on how to make your own policy. We've got ones on human rights. We've got one on sexual safety for empowerment, safeguarding, delivering RSC. We've got a couple on delivering RSC. Working with parents, 2 of those done by a parent. Yeah, more parents there, quite a few parents. Domestic abuse, contraception. There's some really good, easy. People learn these ones, the contraception, explain all different types of contraception, you know, writing a policy. We've got it all. And then if you go into probably my favorite bit, because I reorganized it all the other day, lockdown's been good for something. This is our resources page, so where all the dating agencies are, training organisations, LGBTQ social groups, one which I do co-run with someone in London. If you go into here, there's easy read ones and videos, which is where you can also find the videos I was showing today. But if you go into here, the massive list, these are all up to date. I've checked them all very recently. So there's loads of free resources there on all around relationships, everything. Here are some of my favourite ones that you can buy. With links to them, some books, LGBTQ and gender, so anything. We've got loads there. I saw someone asked about that there's a really good one by Change, an easy read booklet for people who are LGBTQ plus, people learn to it. It's a really good starting point to have those conversations. Regulatory guidance, sexual abuse, some really good guidance there. Capacity and consent, women's health. Yeah, there's loads. There we go. 1 minute to go. I'll stop sharing. So that's www.supportedloving.org.uk. We're a really active Twitter. We've got a special Facebook group. If you message me, I'll show you where that is. But there we go. That's me. That's my side done. For my presentation. I've got some time to answer some questions.
Right.
So I'm ready.
Already. I'm so glad you shared the website, because I use it a lot and refer people, you know, particularly care homes that call me into supported living places. So that's great that people know where that is. So we've got a nice easy question, Claire. First of all, is your PhD available online to read?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, I think I can find it. If they email me, I'll just put my email in the chat.
Right.
I'll put my email in the chat. If you email me, I mean, it's so long. It's about 100,000 words. There's been several articles I could send you, which might be I can't make them available freely because I'm not allowed to do copyright, but you can read the PhD. I'm pretty sure. So if you put in Claire Bates PhD learning disabilities, I'm sure it will come up. But it's really long.
Bedtime reading.
Yeah.
Yeah, perhaps if you're sort of affiliated with a university, then you can get the articles that way.
I mean, I can send them if someone emails me directly. I can send them, but I can't make them sort of widely available.
Sure. Sure. Great. And it was really good, the Sexuality and Relationships Charter. I'm wondering if we can share that on our Facebook, and maybe a link to that.
Yeah.
This sounds
The
good.
link, there's a link in, I mean, yeah, I can put the link on now, actually.
Yeah, that'd be great. Some advice. I mean, really, I suppose this question, they could go to the person who's asking it could go to the website, the toolkit, but any advice on how to support LGBT people with learning disabilities? Would you send them to the toolkit for that?
I'd send them to the toolkit. I'd also suggest we've actually got a webinar where I talk about that in a lot of detail, which you're more than welcome to go on to. It's free. I'd also suggest, if I was going to start, I mean, that's, you know, that's a big topic. But if I was going to support, if I was starting to support someone around who LGBTQ plus, as I said, like, change is really, really good booklet there. It's really useful for helping just to sort of have those discussions with people. Obviously, like, you know, that's a big broad spectrum. I'd say people as individuals, because and if the person, you know, we found, one of my studies, I looked at being bisexual with a learning disability, and one of the things we found in that was just how useful some of the groups are. So some of the, I don't know where the person is who asked that, but when there's no lockdown, there's some really, really good LGBTQ plus social groups for people. So it's a really great way for people to make friends, to meet other people who, you know, shared experiences. So I run one in London with a mate of mine called John, and we, you know, we go out every month, we do like events and stuff, but we've had talks, you know, we've had talks as well and things like that. So it's a good way for people to like meet other people like them and to make friends.
Great. Yeah, I think that in Bristol, the Off the Record is a freedom project, which has got and they perhaps have a social group for people with learning disabilities. So that's one. Whoever asked that question, that's maybe one avenue if they're Bristol based. There's also a question here. It's quite interesting about people with learning disabilities dating people without them. What are your do you? It's a huge topic, isn't it? And maybe.
It's a really big topic. It's a really big topic, right? It's a really big. So funny you asked that. The first thing my PhD was ever going to be about, long before this one ever was written, was what my first idea was. The first thing I took to my supervisor was I wanted to look at power dynamics among relationships where someone has a learning disability and the other person doesn't. And they said that you just wouldn't get any of those people. They wouldn't talk to you, like, because ultimately, if you say, you know, how, you know, there could be a risk that you would say their relationship was abusive. So why would they be willing to talk to you? And we've had so many discussions about this. We've had so many. So years ago, there was a really famous study. God, I could talk for hours on this. So I have to keep it short. So years ago, there was a study by Craft and Craft where they looked at people with learning disabilities in relationships with other people. And years ago, post safeguarding, post all of this, there were a lot more relationships like that. And what they found, that the people they were in relationships with often had some other kind of need. So maybe not a learning disability, but another kind of need. So they were often ex-offenders. Or they had drug and alcohol problems, or possibly mental health issues. I also was part of a study with Michelle McCarthy at the University of Cambridge. She led on it. I just analysed the questionnaires that were sent to social workers and the police and professionals, and they were asked about domestic violence, and they found that women with learning disabilities who were with partners who didn't have a learning disability, they often had, and they were in women with learning disabilities who were in abusive relationships were often in relationships with people without a learning disability who were. But then the Sam film's just recently come out on Twitter, which I've been tweeting about constantly, which is the LGBTQ plus love story, and that's someone with a learning disability and someone without, and it's a really genuinely touching, wonderful story. And I've been really torn, because my experience is I sat on our safeguarding panel for 12 years, and every single relationship that we ever had that come up with abuse was someone with a learning disability, a lot of them were someone with a learning disability, someone without. So my experience is I've not, in my research and my work at Choice Support, I don't think I've come across one that was positive. Although I have had it where someone's been in a relationship and it has been positive, where the other person might not have a learning disability, but they might be autistic or have mental health needs. So, and they were people who needed a similar level of support, not because of their learning disability. So I don't. It's a really tricky one. I'd love to know some really positive examples, but my experience when I've come in contact with that situation, it's often been through safeguarding. So unfortunately, anyone else want to challenge me on that and try and show me some positive ones? I'd love to see it, because I don't believe that we should be categorising people as only going out with other people with learning disabilities.
Absolutely. I suppose we know the research, but we judge every case by case scenario, and your sex in the law training is really about that, isn't it? The sort of thinking about capacity and
I mean, as long as someone's got capacity, there's no reason why it wouldn't. It's not illegal to go. As long as you don't work with the person, it's not illegal. As long as they have capacity to be in a relationship with someone and you don't. But I guess it comes down to the research generally on partner selection shows that we tend to pick partners with the same worldview and same background as ourselves. So I don't know. I don't know.
Okay, we've got a question here that's really interesting. Is there any extra support you can recommend for those with learning disabilities trying to look for relationships or maintain relationships during the pandemic? I've been finding in care homes, etc., people going against the government guidelines, and
I think you skipped my question, Georgina. Sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. You go for it, Sarah, because I know you wanted some time to.
I'll try and say this really quickly, but it kind of follows on from what you were saying. I mean, the area that I work in is disability hate crime, but particularly around mate crime. So I think it's important that we encourage where someone's befriended to exploit them sexually, physically, financially, or emotionally, to encourage that is reported as disability hate crime. But the other areas, I find huge barriers. The longer I've worked in this, massive barriers, because the person might believe that the perpetrator's in love with them. I've seen people have their whole life savings taken. I've seen people sexually abused all their lives to the point where they think it's nothing to be raped, all sorts of things. So people physically abused, but still believing that the person is their friend or lover or whatever. So, and I do a lot of work in getting people physically to learn assertion skills, because a lot of people are very, very easily manipulated. And I don't think you can tell someone to be I think you have to practice it. I use drama and set up role plays and different things. However, then I started thinking, well, there's so many cases now I can't solve because people are entrenched in the behaviour. And so I tried to look at how can we get people trained earlier at school. They should be trained in sexual education, but they all should also be trained in knowing boundaries, in being assertive. This is crucial for SEN because they're so easily manipulated. I do mock scams, and easy. I've had people on the internet dating, lose everything, So anyway, I went to
Sarah, I'm really sorry.
Safeguarding.
Yeah, I'm just aware we've only got 4 more minutes, and I just want to have a sort of a chance.
Anyway, maybe we could talk about it offline, because I've tried to get this put in education and I can't get anywhere with it.
Well, the thing is they are. So we looked at. So when we were doing so I applied to the Tampon Tax Fund to apply for funding to do this kind of work. And we looked at what the government was setting out in schools, and there is a lot on there in the government, in what's coming in SEN. There is actually quite a lot coming out there about consent and learning about happy and healthy relationships and about exploitation. I think I do think moving forward, a lot of that is going to be covered, certainly around knowing what healthy and unhealthy relationships are. I mean, maybe not going to the same level that you're talking to there, but I mean, I work with adults, so I haven't really looked at what completely, but I know that when we was looking at what the government offer, from 2020, we were using that as a basis for the education that we wanted to give to young women that had left school, that were missing out on this. So I think that there is going to be a much more of a focus on that, and certainly on internet safety and stuff moving forward, because it does form part of the new curriculum. Yeah, but it is a massive problem. No, it's huge. It is absolutely huge, and that's certainly, I think, one of the areas we really do need to focus on for people, is understanding. But it comes more back to a chronic loneliness, I think.
Oh yeah,
It comes back to loneliness, because we found that the women in our study, in the one that Michelle did, they women would rather be alone, be in an awful relationship than be alone.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, it's a really big issue.
I'm aware we've got a couple of minutes, so maybe just to clarify that you have sex education resources on your website for both physical and learning disability. Is that right?
No,
not so much physical disability, more you are focused on learning disability.
If you are interested in that, there's social, well, mate, let me just have, so there's SHADA, SHADA, so they've been around since longer than I have, and there's also Social Care Health Alliance. So let me just, what is it? It's I can't find the name. I can find, where is it?
That's all right. What you could do is send me something after, and we could put it on our, we could spread it widely on our Facebook. I think the question.
Oh, here it is. I've got it. Just one second.
Okay.
So yeah, so there's this organisation. I'll put it in the chat. So there's this organisation from the OU. They do people with they do, that's what they do work with people around physical disabilities, and also SHADA. They're much more focused on people with physical disabilities. Now we haven't moved into that area yet. We're mainly learning disabilities.
Great. Okay. It's such a huge topic, isn't it, with so much, and I really just suggest that everyone, I mean, people can come on your training, can't they, Claire? They can go on the website, and you've also put your email, your contact there. So
one thing I could advise you to do is to join Supported Loving. If you go on the website, somewhere there it says sign up to the mailing list. I think it says I think it's in the what we do section, or you can just email me and I'll add you to the list, or you can go on Twitter and it's a pinned post, Supported Loving pinned post, because that way you get hundreds of invites to things. We do stuff all the time. So join it, because there's a lot to say.
Yeah, it's been a great asset to me, definitely, in my work. Okay, we're going to round things up there. So I just want to say, Claire, thank you so much for coming today on the second day of our campaign. I think it's really good to get this insight in on this topic, and hopefully you've explained why this topic is so important within this campaign. You know, that it's about education, it's about sexual safety, it's about having difficult conversations sometimes, but that those conversations do have huge impact on people being able to talk about sexual violence. So that's great. Thank you. And I do please do keep an eye on our website, and our we've got our leaflet. We've got a great talk coming up next Tuesday by Rabia about intersectionality and learning disability. If there's any issues around getting links and things, do get in contact with our info, and that will also be on our website as well. So that's a good place to find it. And I'll finish up now, and unless any